Hey guys, Mrs. Fox here with your Meso-American PowerPoint flipped classroom. Okay, this flipped classroom is going to work a little bit differently. Normally, as we go through slides, you guys have question one and then a title up at the top, and it doesn't really work that way through this series of slides. Okay, so I'll kind of walk you through the notes as we go. Okay, so you can still take great notes and be able to get all that information into your brain. We're going to look at three cultures over the course of this lecture: the Mayans, the Aztec, and the Inca. You guys might remember that the last thing that we covered was the age of exploration. So during the age of exploration, people were out exploring, right? Going and finding new things they didn't know existed, islands, different pathways, faster trading routes. And one of the things that was discovered was North and South America. You might remember that in Europe, when it was discovered by Christopher Columbus, called it the New World, right? And I kept singing to you guys last time, a whole new world, right? So because it was like a whole new world. If you think about all of the land mass in North and South America, we like just doubled the amount of land that was known on planet Earth to Europeans at the time. Now, did Christopher Columbus really discover America? No, right? The Vikings had been here. There's evidence other groups had been here before. Plus, of course, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tribes of different natives that already existed on North and South America when Columbus discovers it, right? But to Europe at that time, you guys remember in the 1490s, this was big news. To them, the knowledge had been lost that other groups had already been there before. This was news to them, like it had just happened. To them, it really did feel like Columbus discovered a whole new world, right? And so we're going to look at three of those tribes that were impacted when North and South America, the New World, is discovered by Europeans. Okay, so that's kind of what we're going to take a look at, and how starkly different really their technology and their values and everything are in comparison to what was happening in Europe the last few units that we've been doing since Renaissance time started. Okay, so go ahead and you should have a piece of paper out by now, highlighters, pencils. You should have the title of your notes down. Okay, this is all part of Unit 8, right? All right, the Meso-American PowerPoint, and here we go. Okay, so something that you want to take in, okay, this is important to remember, is take in that map while we're on this page, and you might even maybe want to push pause and do a really brief like sketch. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but just so you can kind of get the basic shapes of North and South America and plug in the three groups, okay, because we'll go back to that a lot and you guys want to know where they're located. So the Mayans are the first group that we're going to talk about. They're the orange ones on the map, which means they're located right in here in the Yucatan Peninsula. Okay, then we will talk about the Aztecs. They're just, northwest to where the Mayans were located in what is now present day Mexico, right? And here they are in that purplish type of color on the map. And then down in South America, you have the Incans that go through what is now Peru and Chile and lots of other places, okay, along the western coast of South America there. So you might want to sketch that out and label that as the first step of your notes, so you're familiar with what everything is and where it's at, okay? I would also put in the dates that they're active. That will come in handy later as well. So push pause to be able to do that, and when you're ready, come join us. Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page, because the first group we're going to talk about is the Mayans. So over on the right hand side of your notes, you want to go ahead and in big capital, maybe take up 2 lines of space, put the Mayans, because the next several slides will be about the Mayan culture. The notes are kind of in 3 parts, right? So the first part's going to be the Mayans. And again, they were active from about 200 to 900. You might have noticed on the map it says 300 to 900, give or take, guys. Depends on the point you want to start saying they were active at, but around, the same ballpark. Remember, CE is the same thing as AD, for those of you guys that are still familiar with the AD system. So this is after Christianity has been established in Europe and the Middle East and everything, okay? This would be like during the medieval period for Europe, when they were going through the Dark Ages and feudalism and lords and ladies and knights and all that kind of stuff. That's when the Mayans were around, when and even back further than that, with the Roman Empire still being around and at the height that we started with way back in August, right? So the Mayans were at their height of their community and tribal significance during the height of the Roman Empire, the fall of the Roman Empire, and into that medieval period in Europe that we talked about with feudalism and lords and ladies and all those kind of things, okay? So in the meantime, on the other side of the planet, we had the Mayans, and we're going to discuss them. Now remember, the Mayans don't know the Europeans existed, and the Europeans didn't know the Mayans existed, okay? So the Mayans is one of those Native American tribes. They're an Indian group of people, all right? So where are they located? You'll want to know this. Again, it's that Yucatan Peninsula. So if you look, here's Texas if you were in the present-day United States, right? And so the Texas border is on the Gulf of Mexico here, right? So this sort of C shape you see starting in the United States and going down into Mexico makes this C here. And at the very tip of what is now present-day Mexico, we have the Yucatan Peninsula, and that is where they lived and were active. So make sure you get that down under the Mayan portion of your notes. You might even want to make yourself a left-hand side question asking about location or times active or something like that, okay? Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Okay. Tikal is their capital. This is another thing you want to know. Get down that Tikal was their capital, and that they were a farming community. All right, so the Mayans' homelands were made up of large chunks of farmland. They had successful farming, and if you guys know about human geography in general, the more food you're able to grow successfully, typically the bigger your population is going to get. And this is what happens with the Mayans. Their population will start growing as their food production improves and is successful. Okay, so as they became healthier, their population grows, they're living longer, and they start establishing villages. And eventually some of those villages will end up growing into great cities. Do they look a lot different than the European cities of Roman times or of medieval times? Yes, they do, but they were still great in their own way. They are far removed from Egypt. They have no idea the Egyptians at one point made pyramids, right? And yet here we are halfway around the world in North America, and the Mayans in their capital city of Tikal had several pyramid type buildings, as you guys can see in the picture, right? They looked different, kind of some different engineering techniques that they used, but kind of the same idea. All right, so make sure you guys have that stuff down about farming and their capital. This can all go in that same area. So their capital, and that they mostly farm. And what is their class structure? So if you're a Mayan, okay, their class structure had the king at the very top. So the king along with his family. So they were a monarchy, except the Mayans had several different cities throughout their territory, and every Mayan city, every major Mayan city with maybe many villages attached to it, okay? So every major Mayan city had its own king. So there were several Mayan kings at once because they each ruled over their own section, right, of the Yucatan Peninsula. And so the king and their families were at the top of the class structure for Mayans, and they would also produce a lot of or perform, not produce, they would perform a lot of the duties that priests in other religions or areas would be known to perform, because they're very much a religious society, guys. All of the societies that we'll be discussing, including Mayans, were polytheistic. Remember what polytheistic means. That means they believed in many gods, not just one god. For a while we've been in Europe and talking a lot about Christianity, and that was a monotheistic religion, one god, and Islam was a monotheistic religion with Allah, right? One God. Well, we're back to polytheism over here with the Mayans, okay? And the king and his family would do a lot of the priestly type of duties. Below them, you'd have the nobles. The nobles were more educated, wealthy class. Okay, so scholars, architects, wealthy merchants. Some of the warriors could work their way up to a noble class if they had fought and persevered and been successful in many battles and things. Okay, the nobles are very highly respected in this society, almost as high as the king and his family are, but of course the king and his family is respected even more. Okay, but nobles are definitely highly respected. Then you had the majority of the population. 85% of the population is the peasants. Okay, so peasants were farmers, which, remember, lots of their land was farmland. Okay, laborers that did things like creating the pyramids you saw in the last picture, or creating baskets or pottery or different things that they would use in daily life. And so the peasants are most of the population, typically uneducated a lot of the time, right? Day laborers of different sorts. And then you did have slavery in the Mayan culture. Mostly slaves came from prisoners of war. They would go and end up, having fights with other tribes, native tribal groups that were surrounding them. And in those battles, sometimes they took prisoners, and those prisoners would become their slaves in some cases. So Mayans did practice slavery. At this point, I'd probably draw another line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page and have a question about class structure and their capital and way of life and that sort of thing kind of tied in together for your left-hand side question. One of the most important crops in Mayan culture was maize, which is a form of corn, okay? And so their maize god and the god of rain are some of the most major gods in Mayan culture because, of course, you need rain for farming, right? And corn was a staple in their diet, something they had with almost every meal, if not every meal. And so the maize god and the god of rain were both very important. Okay, so here's another question for Mayans religion. Again, they are polytheistic. The Mayans happen to worship over 160 different gods. There were all types of gods, from the sun god, the moon god, the god of death and war and rain, maize gods. Other crops had their own gods as well. Some of the emotions of people, like love and different things, they had gods. They believed that whoever their king was, and remember there's more than one king at a time in Mayan culture, that those kings are divine rulers. This is a term that we've looked at this year already. So if you remember divine ruling, it's when the people believe that divine intervention made this person be in charge. Divine, supernatural, godly, okay? So the gods, or the God, if you're a Christian and you believe in divine in the divine ruler, okay, that person was picked at that time in history and that bloodline and that specific family at that particular time, was all sorted out before that person was ever born by whichever gods they worship. So in this case, the Mayan multi-polytheistic religion, right? The gods had collaborated and chose this specific person to be the king at that time. Okay, so because of that, they had a special connection with the gods that mere mortals, the rest of the population, did not have. And that's why the kings were the ones that did a lot of the priestly duties, the sacrificial and ceremonial type duties in Mayan culture, because they believed they had this special connection to the gods because the gods had chosen them to be the rulers. Their religion included a lot of prayer. They sacrificed. There were human sacrifices, but it was rare for Mayans. It's not something by any means they're known for at all. They did fast often, which means not eating, sometimes for a period of days even, to try to make the gods happy or to ask for something particular like rain for their crops or something like that. And they also, something unusual about the Mayans, this is very rare around the world in general for any time period, is no matter how good or bad of a person you are, what you believed or didn't believe, the Mayans thought that the afterlife, when you die, was something that was an unhappy existence. There wasn't like a version of heaven and a version of hell for the Mayan culture. Everybody's afterlife was something that was not a happy thing. Okay, so that is its own little space. Draw a line underneath everything you just wrote all the way across your page. Quetzalcoatl is one of their main gods, the god of wisdom and learning for the Mayans. Okay, Tikal Um, that's their capital, and there is a mask that's been kind of worn away from erosion, but their rain god. Okay. Again, so just some different pictures and things of different gods. Okay, we'll get to this pyramid slide when you guys join me for part 2. So when you're ready for part 2, come on back. Until then, have a good one, and I'll see you soon.